Welcome everyone to Tap In. Today with us. We have Paul Marcus, who is a PhD and a supervisor and training psychoanalyst, and who's written many books. Most recently, the one we'll be speaking about today, here in 2025. I hope I am not mistaken about the year, but it's called the Psychoanalysis and the Wisdom of Ecclesiastes, a time to heal. In short, we can just call it a time to heal. but but the word Ecclesiastes is important because that's like the whole setting, and and to combine psychoanalysis, to use a psychoanalytic lens to look at a book like Ecclesiastes. I thought that was really interesting. So welcome, Paul Marcus. So glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So maybe first of all, did I get that right with the book just being out?
Yeah, the book just came out about a month ago, maybe a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
and a lot of people have been interested in it because it brings together. Ecclesiastes is it's such beautiful poetry. Everybody knows from the song from the birds. Remember the birds? A time to heal, a time, that whole thing. So
So it's
it's in
yeah,
people's minds.
yeah, it's a time for many things. So it's a time to heal. It's a time to die. It's a time to there's
That's right.
there's a time for everything.
I'm afraid so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So and in is it in Hebrew that instead of ecclesiastics you would say Koheleth? Is that it?
Kohelet. Kohelet.
Koheleth. Okay.
Kohelet.
So
Yeah.
Koheleth is the author of this book in the Bible.
As
And
far as we could tell.
yeah, there's some mysterious about that. And you
Well,
say,
it's important to note that the last 5 or 6 lines are an insertion by someone else, an editor, which was meant to make the radical ideas more acceptable to the mainstream Jewish community. So they've toned it down a little bit. But I actually think that the unconscious message of the last 5 or 6 lines is very much in sync with what Kohelet was trying to say. So it kind of works. There's a double structure to it,
that's
but
interesting.
that's an editorial insertion apparently.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's something that could really annoy us in a way. Oh, we wanted the original, but then you say, actually, it's like a big Freudian slip in a way.
Well, I don't know if it was a slip. I think the rabbis decided that they're going to put this radical book in the sacred canon on one hand, but
Yeah.
they want to sanitize it a little bit. They want to make it easier for the average person so it doesn't undermine their outlook on the world.
But then you say there is some unconscious message in there.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Because the last 5 lines are basically saying, look, I've talked about how difficult and miserable the world is and how repetitive it is and how many questions there are. But at the end of the day, you should do God's work. You should do the mitzvot, the commandments, which is another way of saying that you should be willing and able to love.
Mm.
And Ecclesiastes,
Yeah.
Kohelet, his antidote to his despair was basically a love solution. Find a woman who you love and live a life dedicated to pleasure.
Mm.
So, um, in that sense, there's a linkage to the last 5 lines. I think.
I see, I see. And it's good that you are using some interpretive lens because what that could also say to us is, oh, you just gotta get married, right? If you're very,
Oh
you
yeah,
just,
no, no, it's not.
that's a literal interpretation, right?
That's just a little, yeah, yeah. And the book, remember, the book's a few thousand years old, so marriage meant a whole different thing than it means now.
Sure. Sure, good to remember that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a few questions here, but you've just opened the whole despair thing, and I think I have to go to that question because, oh my God, I know about despair from my own personal life. Um, so yeah, that it's different. It's your book has really touched me. It's done something to me, and the way that I see that is if I remember, like after I've read a thing, and then it comes up, like I'll remember it and I'll relate it to my life. I mean, that maybe sounds like it always should be like that, but it's not. For me, that's very special when it happens like that.
Oh, I'm glad it touched you.
Yeah, and especially like you say, the whole about despair. Okay, let's see if I have a quote here. Um, where I think you're maybe this is where you're quoting Freud, the thing about when we begin to ask ourselves questions about the meaning of life and death, we are sick, for none of that exists objectively.
Right.
There's something about that we shouldn't ask about what the meaning of life is.
Yeah. Well, this is an example of where Freud and Kohelet disagree.
Uh-huh.
Because Kohelet, in Freud's eyes, Kohelet would be the ultimate neurotic. He's full of he's full of resignation with despair, and he's going on and on about how pointless life is.
Mm.
And so Freud would regard that as a neurotic response to life. Kohelet, on the other hand, sees it as this is what we're meant to do, to reflect on our life. And he's seeing the world in a much darker way than Freud saw it. And Freud was pretty pessimistic about the human condition. But
Mm.
Kohelet takes it even further.
Mm.
Remember, Freud wrote his famous last line when he wrote that the purpose of psychoanalysis is to transform neurotic misery into normal unhappiness. That's a
Yeah.
pretty pessimistic outlook. But Kohelet was even more pessimistic.
Okay. Well, how so? How was Kohelet more pessimistic?
Well, because he basically looked at, you see, Kohelet had everything that most human beings at the time and probably now want, but he was still felt miserable.
Ah.
Unlike Job, if you remember the book of Job, Job has a pretty good life, and then the devil convinces God to set the devil against Job and throw all these terrible things at him.
Mm.
So it's understandable that he felt bad. Job felt terrible.
Yeah.
But Ecclesiastes has everything. He's got wine, women, song. He's got a beautiful place he lives. He has all these beautiful things, and yet he still feels a certain agitated depression. I would call it a kind of
Ah.
agitated depression, resignation with despair.
And and is that because there is no meaning to life?
Well, in Kohelet's view, there's so many things, they call them dirty tricks. One commentator on Kohelet called Kohelet has 5 or 6 dirty tricks. What he means by that is certain aspects of life that he's focusing on that make being happy extremely difficult.
Ah, like he
For
was,
example,
yeah.
the fact that um, in this universe, there's no divine or human justice. That the good people suffer and bad people flourish.
Mm.
Okay, so this makes you think like, what's with the world?
Yeah.
Secondly, the fact that we're going to die and we're going to be forgotten, and within 100 years from now, our little pathetic life will have no meaning at all because you won't even be remembered.
That is really depressing.
Yeah, well,
I feel I
well,
feel that is depressing.
it is, it is.
Okay, so
And
that was the two things. It was there a third?
yeah, there's a third thing. Well, there's the monotony of human history. In other words, everything repeats itself.
Mm.
Kohelet believes in cyclical time, not linear time. Things keep going around and around. There's nothing new under the sun. He says that like 28 times.
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. And if you look at life that way, it really is characterized by sham, drudgery, and broken dreams. You know, it becomes so. What does one do with that? And Kohelet was also very concerned with the fact that that human relationships are so fraught with anxiety. Again, that's similar to Freud. Freud believed that also. But these are all aspects of life that make life make living a flourishing life so difficult.
Yeah.
Um, and so even one other thing is the fruitlessness of the labor that we do. In other words, the pointlessness of it. So he had a very dark view. I call it tragic comic. It's almost a tragic comic outlook on the human condition, similar to Freud in a way, who also had that kind of dark view.
Mm. This is really entangled in what really moved you about your book, because I have a part of me who can really feel that, and
Right,
especially in my earlier years. But I think it's still around, and I think for people who are into astrology, I think it has a lot to do with the Sagittarian archetype, because that's the philosopher, and it's where we ask that question of meaning, and when there's no good answer to it, it can become very hopeless. Um, but um, but a thing that has helped me in your book is that you say we think we have so much control that we are even in a position to regret things,
right,
and that has helped me, because I think my mind does that a lot, and I think that is uh, communicating to the meaninglessness if I'm
right.
regretting a lot of things. And yeah, if you can you help me speak about that part of the book, if you know what I'm
Well,
referring to?
yeah, I mean, Kohelet believes that we live in an unknowable and uncontrollable world. That
Yeah.
most of the important decisions that we make, we don't have much control of. For example, when we're born, when we're going to die, um, the role of luck in so much of our everyday life. And so, without having much control, and with things being essentially unknowable, you basically are like a rag doll being thrown by the wind this way and that way. You
Mhm.
don't really have existential footing. You don't have a grounding,
Yeah.
and that's another aspect of what makes life so challenging, is the fact that you have so little control. And people talk about control all the time. As a therapist, I was thinking to myself the other day that people are often talking about they feel controlled, they want to control others, or they're out of control.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this control theme is a big one.
It
You know,
is.
it's really a big one in life. But
Yeah.
Kohelet felt that there's no way you're going to have control, and you're not even going to know what's really going on most of the time. So
Mm.
you're just being pulled along by nature, going around in circles.
And there's just some freeing thought in that. It's a freeing notion in that sense, that when I'm so angry with myself and all the regretting all the things that I've done, I think you have a passage around this in the book, like being just so tired of yourself in a way, and just unhappy, unsatisfied with your choices in life, then it comes in handy and you can say, actually, I don't even have that kind of control. So it's not up to me. I cannot, it's not in my position to regret it in a way. It's out of my hands.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very hard to live that way because we all are driven to try to control that which can't be controlled. And
Yeah.
it gets us into all types of difficulties with people and relationships and things like that. It's uh it's a big one. It's a big theme for Kohelet. And Freud felt that, we humans, because we don't have much control of the universe, we are inclined to look for systems like religion or philosophy or even psychoanalysis to give us some sense of control and understanding. But in a way, that's a neurotic solution to the problem of the fact that we don't really have much control. Religion being the best example. Freud wrote The Future of Illusion. That's what he was talking about when he said that religion was an illusion, because there's an illusion of there being a father up there
Mm,
who is controlling what goes on down here.
mm,
And for Freud, that was not a sustainable belief. Of course, for theologians, it's a very sustainable belief,
mm,
but
mm.
not for Freud.
Mm. So, but yeah, but you are a psychoanalyst today, and you don't necessarily agree with Freud on everything, right?
No, I don't.
So,
Right. For
but
example, the meaning issue. I think Freud's wrong about meaning. I think patients are always asking about the meaning of life. And in a certain way, Freud was talking about what's the meaning of human existence. That was all what he was writing about in one form or another.
yeah,
So I think Freud, he contradicts himself sometimes.
mm. I mean, because it's so existential that you want to find something to hang your head on, put it like that.
Right.
Um, but did it help Ecclesiastics? Did it help him that he was very much into enjoying life, drinking wine?
Well, he believed that at the end of the day, the only thing that is worth doing is enjoying your life to the best of your ability. And a love relationship was the central core of that enjoyment. And that
Yeah.
is very compatible with Freud, who said that the purpose of life was to love and work. He famously said to love and work.
Mm.
Those two things give us a sense of purpose and meaning. So he contradicts himself, Freud, but for Kohelet, he's a pleasure seeker.
Yeah.
He sees man or woman as a pleasure seeking entity in a kind of erotically tinged universe. That's sort of how Freud views it, and Kohelet's not that far off from that point of view.
How so? He thinks of the universe how?
Well, he basically thinks at the end of the day, the only thing you can hang your coat on is seeking out sensual pleasure and joy through love.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that you can count on, if
Mm.
anything.
Yeah.
And there's a story in the Talmud about the rabbis of two different schools of thought. They were sitting around trying to answer the question: was it better that God created the human being or did not create the human being? Would it have been better have not to? And they have all this debate. And at the end of the day, they conclude that yes, it would have been better if God never created man.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
but they wisely said the fact that you're alive and in the world, you might as well make the best of it. You
Mm.
might as well enjoy what you can. You might as well live a moral life the best you can. So it kind of captures what Kohelet is actually saying. This is the best we can do. But it's a big deal to be able to love, to have a give and receive love is not so easy.
That is for sure a spiritual path, I would call it, and
Yeah,
a one we're all on in some way or
yeah,
another.
absolutely. Yeah,
And you have this quote where you say it's about perceiving the bigger picture and acceding to the limitations of human knowledge while finding satisfaction, if not contentment, in the present moment. So it's also this, okay, centering being here right now rather than being back at everything that has happened and despairing over that.
right. Yeah, in a way, at that moment, he sounds very Buddhist. You know, Kohelet sounds Buddhist in the sense of trying to be present in the moment, not clinging to the moment, but let it open up the way it opens up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that Kohelet was very wise in seeing that. That's the best we can do is the pleasures that come your way to enjoy them the best you can, and because you don't really have much control over anything anyway.
Yeah, I'd like to take that away from it. Just
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah,
whatever you can. That's good.
yeah.
But he was a preacher, right? Like who
Yeah,
was
that's the translation of Kohelet is preacher or teacher,
uh
something like that. Yeah.
so who is this? What is the do you know about the origin of this mysterious book that's been edited a bit in the end? W- Was he a
Well,
existing person, or what do you think?
well, the scholars of Kohelet basically feel he was probably a bachelor. He probably had a bunch of relationships with women. None of them worked out very well. He wasn't married. He didn't have any children.
Mm,
You don't know anything about his early life, his parents, or anything like that.
mm,
He was probably one of these wisdom writers, one of these philosophers that was wandering around talking about how he sees the world, and
mm,
a little like Socrates, basically trying to engage people in conversation
mm.
about the purpose of life. And in the end, he ends up with a pretty tough message. It's a
Other
tough
than
message.
it's a tough message, but then the antidote is walking the path of love, right?
It seems that way, yes, and pleasure, yeah,
Uh, and pleasure. We have
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just so I mentioned the literal interpretation. I grew up very fundamentalistic. I'm not in that anymore, but that's how I grew up. So I had for the longest time I had an email called Under the Sun, uh, at
Really?
gmail.com. Yeah, because of this, because I'd so identified with that whole nothing new happens and that there was some energy in it that I related to. And so, and in a way that I felt spoke more truth to me than other parts of the Bible was like, just say it like it is. It feels pretty meaningless sometimes.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's really remarkable that the rabbis had the wisdom to bring this radical book that went against all the orthodox outlooks. It was really quite bold and courageous to put that in the canon because
Mhm.
it is part of the sacred canon. It's read every year at a certain holiday, and so they must have felt that there was something there that you could take from it, even though the ending is kind of dark.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if it's interpreted literally, then there's no problem because it's just keep to your wife and. But except there's the whole time for everything. Maybe that's a little bit problematic that there's a time to kill and. But Paul, what carried you over here? What drew you to this
I'm
project?
still trying to figure that out. I don't know really.
Okay, interesting.
I mean, I always, ever since I was younger, I like you, I felt that Kohelet spoke to me. He
Yeah.
sort of characterized how much of a struggle life is, and how if one could only generate resignation but without despair,
Yeah.
not resignation with despair, but resignation without despair. And that's always been something that I've been struggling with. It's I have a dark side to my personality, and that found my finding Kohelet was very much in sync with that dark side of my personality.
Mm.
So similar to you, at the time you were, life was swings and roundabouts. It was not so easy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Um, so I also just feel like I want to ask you other questions because you have written so
Sure.
much, and so I mean, when you look at your authorship, everything that you've written, um, what do you feel is there any point from anything else you've written that kind of helped you at in this project?
Uh, well, I've always been interested in the way different cultures draw from their wisdom tradition in trying to live a flourishing life.
Mm.
And Kohelet fits into that category. I mean, the Greeks were masterful in this. The Greeks, they really understood that life was perplexing, if not difficult. And so my involvement with reading some of the Greek literature on Stoicism and, some of the more familiar schools of thought, I think that sort of influenced this because I saw Kohelet as being rather different than all those other schools of thought because he was so dark,
Mm.
so tragic comic.
Right. So tragic. So we feel like laughing. That's like tragic.
Well, it's like seeing the humor in tragedy and the tragedy in humor.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
That kind of thing.
yeah. And then you've been a therapist for so long, supervising others and all of that. What have you found is really helpful to people when they are, you know, not sure of what's going on and not feeling too great
Yeah.
about themselves?
Well, I think the main problem, and it's not an original thought, but I happen to agree with it. I think the main problem that the patients I see have is they have an inordinate or an excessive narcissism. An excessive narcissism. They
Okay.
have a sense of entitlement and grandiosity that gets in the way of them being givers of love. They're all focused on what they can get, not what they can give.
Hmm.
And so that's a important angle of vision on what goes on with most of the patients I see. They're all feeling it's like what we call infantile narcissism. So the goal of therapy or analysis is to downwardly modify the narcissism so it's more realistic and reasonable rather than so extreme. Now that's
Hmm.
very difficult because, as you know, people fight you every inch of the way. Every inch of the way.
Hmm.
It's a battle.
Oh man, I really wanted you to talk about narcissism because you mentioned that in the book as well. And so I'm gonna ask you something.
Sure.
That's a little private, but you can just
Yeah. No problem.
stop it at any time. It's just that I've seen your birth chart. I don't have the time of it, so I don't know where the
Sure.
house placements are. But I do know this. No matter what time of day it is, there is this very central configuration around what we call the South Node. That is in the system that I work with, seen as what we carry in this life, we come in with in this life in a big way. And so specifically for you, I mean, the South Node is always also related to other nodes in general is related to the moon and then the mother. And for you, you both have Moon and Pluto there in Leo. And so that I thought about when I read, when you mentioned narcissism in your book. I was like, oh yeah, maybe this is an imagination. So I'm just asking, maybe you grew up with a mother who wanted you to perform so that she could feel better herself, something like that.
That's interesting. Well, my mother was quite narcissistic,
Okay, good.
and she often insisted that I be her audience. I listened to her.
Oh, correct.
So I became her confidant in ways that were, looking back on it, were not appropriate. It
Mm,
kind of messed me up. But I enjoyed being special compared to my brother and sister. So
mm.
as a child, I had a stake in that. On one hand, on the other hand, it was actually destroying me in the process.
Yeah, for sure. So inappropriate, right? Okay. So but that's in your chart, Paul. Isn't that interesting? It's like that's what in a way we can say, okay, that it was supposed to happen. That's what you didn't have a choice in that. You didn't have a choice. That's how you grew up. That was your mother's, deal at the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no, exactly right. I didn't have a choice. I didn't even know it was a problem.
No, no,
I
sure.
realized it was a problem later. I thought that was the normal, that everybody was in that situation.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a question of lowering your expectations. In fact, happiness is probably just defined by the more your expectations are congruent with your fate, the happier you'll be. If you lower your expectations, the chances of being happier are much greater.
Mm, yeah. And I bet it's also really helped you with all of that therapy and to be able to like see, okay, there was something inappropriate about that. And then um,
Oh
being
yeah,
being your own autonomous self apart from what you came here with, and healing.
right,
Have you
sure.
found that your own healing journey has gone in parallel with you helping others to heal?
Um, well, I'm pretty good at empathizing with my patients because I haven't always been so reasonable. You're getting me at the end of the tail end of my life. There was many years of great struggle and pain.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, when people come in, I feel like I know what they're talking about. Usually, not all the time. There's some patients I can't relate to. I don't really get it.
Mm.
And like a pedophile, for example.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's very hard for me to imagine that being something I would want to do.
Yeah,
It
sure.
just is just it's too weird. It's too horrible.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah,
most,
I mean, look, most people, the question of why do people become psychotherapists?
yeah.
It's basically an attempt to improve your own biography. To some extent, it's about that. It's trying to shape yourself into the kind of person you wished you were, rather than the person that you actually are.
That is so interesting.
Don't you think?
I maybe I would change are to were, the person that you were. I mean, that's why you can relate to people, is because you've been through that and you've been in those survival situations. And then and then something happened where you can maybe trust a little bit in life again and a little bit. And then that's how I find it, is like along the way when I help people, that helps me as well.
Yeah, it does. No, it does work that way. Yeah.
Mm.
Although it's very hard to be a successful psychotherapist, because most people, even though they're paying you for your expertise, most people, as I said earlier, fight you every inch of the way. They don't want to change, and even though they say they want to change, but the resistance, the defensiveness is very, very strong.
Mm.
and that becomes the struggle. That's why it takes so damn long.
The survival. That's the little our little personality, craving stability, craving that things are not changing because we think maybe that's all I have,
Right.
and so
Exactly.
it feels so scary to change in a way.
It does. Well,
Yeah,
it means giving up the familiar
yeah,
and going into the wilderness on your own, a little bit like Abraham, was told to leave your whole world and go into the wilderness and look for the promised land. Most people don't want to be like Abraham. They want to be like Odysseus, who was having all these experiences, but the goal was to return home, home, home. It's a very different between Odysseus and Abraham, a very different uh, outlooks on life.
can you share some more about Odysseus, because I don't even remember that.
Um, well, he basically left Penelope, if I recall. This is the Odyssey, the book, the Odyssey, and he went. He had all these experiences, but always he wanted to return home to Penelope. In other words, it's a metaphor for the trying to get back to what is stable and familiar. Where
Yeah.
Abraham was going into the wilderness and he was told, "Forget your past; it's
Mm,
gone. Now you have to go into the future. There's a promise of a future, but it's
mm,
going to be out there, away from everything that's familiar."
mm,
And I think that distinction, which is not mine, it's a distinction made by a philosopher named Emmanuel Levinas. He
ah,
talks about the Odysseus versus Abraham, but I think it's a very good analogy for what human beings have to do when they're in therapy, which is
yeah.
they have to basically eventually let go of the past and
Mm,
go into the unknown future, and
mm,
hopefully make it good,
yeah.
which is not so easy.
Good for future. Yeah. I have one more thing that I really would love to speak to you about here on my list, and that is the psychology of work. Because you talk about finding your entire sense of importance from work, and that is, of course, unfulfilling. Uh, but then, I mean, we do that a lot, right? In terms of what brings happiness, uh, you gotta work in something and feel like fulfilled to some extent by your work. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is when work becomes your god, when work becomes your it's like idol worship. It's the only thing that matters to you,
Yeah,
especially now with all the technology. People can't unplug. Even
yeah,
when they're home with their families, they can't unplug from their cell phone. So creative work is and productive work is definitely one of the important factors, but in trying to build a flourishing life. But work is very seductive because
yeah.
it's very consuming, and we get a lot of affirmation from our work, and it's very easy to lose sight of what else is going on in your life that's important. Your partner, having children, and all that. You can't you can't do that effectively if you're utterly obsessed with work.
I totally
Most
recognize
people,
that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, most people are unhappy with their job.
Mm.
Around, I think the statistic is around 60 or 70% of people experience their work as every day like a Monday. Exactly. In other words, they don't want to be there, they don't want to do it, and they don't like it.
Mm.
It's just it's waiting to get to Friday, to the end of the week.
Yeah, so it's a paradox how much we can feel we're finding our sense of worth there, yet it can be really draining. And I really recognize what you say about that. It takes up so much time, and you can also rationally give it your priority because this is where the money comes from. So it must be more important than, doing some yin yoga, that, that you're talking about earlier with resignation without despair, that kind of pausing in life. It keeps you at it because you're kind of tied up to that paycheck.
Yeah. Well, I forget the name of the writer who spoke about the difference between a job, a career, and a calling.
Yeah.
And a job is people who work just for the paycheck. A career are people who work for the paycheck but also want to move up the ladder in their career. And then there are people who experience work as a calling, as
Yeah.
something that touches them deeply and has some real societal um, um, improvements are a big part of what they do. And you don't have to be a highfalutin person to have life as a calling. I once had a patient who was a bridge builder. He was one
Yeah.
of the, and he felt that he was doing a great work for the city of New York and helping all these people. And he loved what he was doing, fixing the bridges and making everything safe. So you don't have to be a theologian or a philosopher. You can be an ordinary person and still find your work to be a calling.
For sure. And this goes back to when we talk about narcissism and that being a huge, mm, um, well, something that's really difficult, not only for other people meeting it, but also for yourself if you're caught up in that. So here, what you're saying is, if you contribute to others and you feel that it has value for yourself as well, then that's actually healing, improves your sanity in some way. And also, I'm thinking about a calling. That's definitely what we do as therapists. I mean, if I don't think you would do that if it wasn't right. That would be
Oh yeah,
too tough.
it's an impossible profession. Being a psychotherapist or a psychoanalyst is an impossible profession.
Yeah.
It's you're going against the river. Everyone's going downstream. You're trying to go upstream. It's a constant. It's a struggle. You'd
Mm.
only want to do that if you had some real skin in the game.
Yeah.
You know, you have to really have some emotional commitment to that kind of work
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's a strange way of spending your life.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, isn't it?
It's
Yeah.
very strange.
Yeah.
And it's listening to everyone's worries and troubles and
Yeah.
getting paid for it is a very strange thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you happy
You
that
know,
you work that way though?
yeah, I think I found my niche. This is what I can do. Um, I think I think you need a lot of experience to get good at this. You need at least 10 years to really know what you're doing.
Mhm.
So much of what one learns from experience on the job. And I think you need a good supervisor who helps you see what you're not able to see and what you're not doing right for that person, because it's very hard to self reflect. You know, that's why Freud was so brilliant. He wrote 24 volumes of self reflection. I don't know how did he accomplish that? How can a human being do that? But that's what he did. It was all based on his own self understanding, all these insights that he had about other people. It was quite remarkable.
Wow. No, I love that because that's what I find as well, that it's to do with what triggers me, what happens inside of me. That's what I need help with from a supervisor. Like,
Yeah.
why was I not able to breathe calmly? Why did I get carried away with a good advice or whatever I did during the session? So
Well,
this,
you deal with people who are traumatized. That's very evocative. That
yeah,
really can get you upset.
for sure, for your own stuff. Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah. Because people are talking about such terrible things usually.
yeah. But it's
I mean,
so. I mean, this is the subtitle of your book there, A Time to Heal. And that's the amazing thing I find, is that even though it's so destructive and it's so horrible, but people have been through, and also usually what they think of themselves, then when we're in it together, I mean, something can just happen, something really
Yeah.
amazing.
Well,
Just
that's a miracle. It feels like a miracle.
it
The
does.
person who the person who described that beautifully was Martin Buber, of course, when he spoke about I and thou relationship. And those moments are rare, but they do occur when you're fully engaged with the person you're talking to.
Yeah,
Something unique happens that it's very hard to put your fingers on, but it feels like you've broken through something.
yeah, and it feels like love. I think
Yeah, I get it. Ultimately that's the cure.
that is the cure. Yeah, that is the
It's
healing
the
path.
only
Mhm.
I think
Yeah,
so. Yeah, that's what we're really left with. But that's that's a lot.
that's what we're left with. It is a
Yeah.
lot. I mean, and you can say it just from your mind, and you know that that is the answer. But there are different ways of getting that answer inside yourself. There's different channels to get it with, you know. So when it's
Oh yeah.
deeper, when it's experienced love, then that is so profound and healing. And I think it's a good point that that is, like you say, that is the cure for also the meaninglessness that we started speaking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's the antidote that Kohelet has for the meaninglessness of life. He narrows it down to basically a love relation. It's interesting when Martin Buber, a great philosopher, was once told that the great Freud said that the purpose of life was love and work. And he said that was good, but not complete. He said love, work, faith, and humor.
Ah,
So I think those other two qualities are very much important to have at your in your soul.
for sure. Yes. Yes. Have some humor. And then you said faith. So like
Faith, yeah.
faith in just a higher power somehow.
Well, it could be faith in a higher power, or it could be faith in nature, or faith in the process that one's engaged in. Some sort of dedicated higher value that guides and animates what one does in the room with the other person.
Yes. Yeah, I can definitely feel that. Yeah, when you are stuck in that meaninglessness and despair and what happened with my life, why was it supposed to be this way? Then trusting, just like saying, okay. And I think that is what touched me about parts of your book there around not being able to control it, because that implies, well, someone else is controlling this. It's out of my hands.
Right.
And so I have to lean into that. And I have to trust that this was what was supposed to happen, and I'm not even great enough to undo that, you know.
No,
Even if I went
no.
back in time, even if I got a second chance, went back in time, it's not within my power.
Well, I mean, as you know, one of the things that's so hard for patients is to accept the reality that they were raised by very, very impoverished parents,
Yeah,
parents who really harmed them. To
yeah,
begin to forgive that is very difficult, but to the extent that they can't forgive their parents, they can move beyond the anger, because to
yeah,
walk around angry your whole life is a terrible feeling.
yeah,
You want to really get to the next level, which is forgiveness,
yeah.
which is related to faith, obviously.
Mm. I
how
give.
how one does that is very difficult to understand. How does one facilitate someone forgiving a father or a mother who was neglectful, for example?
Mm.
It's not so easy.
No. Yeah, and I think could it not? Don't you think it could have to do with that kind of sense that it cannot change? I have to accept it somehow. It's not possible to change that part of my story. I think because that I think, like you said, there's so much about control and this modern person, in this modern society, and what we take ourselves to be in this modern time has to do with someone who can actually be autonomous. Let's do something about my life, right? And so I think that can be in my psyche when I think about what has happened that was very negative, and then I can be like, I'm supposed to, I should be able to change this just because of my self-perception in this modern time where that is what we do a lot. But actually to let that go and say, we cannot, it's the human condition. We cannot change everything. And
No,
then
no.
that's a release into some kind of forgiveness. What do you think about that?
I think it's a good point because the people that insist that the world be the way it isn't are usually miserable. They're constantly frustrated.
Yeah.
Accepting reality is very hard, but you need to do that in order to have a flourishing life. Otherwise, you're constantly knocking on the door, looking for love in all the wrong places, as the song goes, and you never are satisfied.
Mm,
You're never satisfied.
mm,
So it becomes a real challenge.
mm,
Yeah, very
mm,
difficult.
mm.
But well, yeah, that's my thought on that.
Okay, good. I just want to give some time. Maybe there was something. I don't,
Yeah,
I don't want to I don't want to interrupt a good thought coming out.
yeah,
but for Marcus, we are almost at our time together. So I just want to yeah give you some time to feel into if there's anything that you could possibly give to us here in the end. Something you want to say to yeah to to well, let's not end at meaninglessness, and I don't think we have.
no.
Have spoken about love, but just how do you feel like putting containing this for us a little bit?
Well, I think in a way what Buber said is really the antidote: love, work, faith, and humor. I think those four, if you can get those four elements somehow aligned with how you live your life, the chances of being happier, or at least episodically happier, is much greater. But these are acquisitions that one has to struggle for because they're not easy. It's not easy to have work as a calling. It's not easy to give and receive love. It's not easy to have a belief in something beyond yourself. And it's really difficult to be laughing at things that are going on around you.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I would say that, that's a lot.
That is a lot. You have to work
This is a
for it,
lot.
and then there is a way. Then there is a way, and
The, pro-
and
the problem is that knowing what to do is one thing, being able to implement it in your real life is another thing,
yes, I discovered that
right?
for sure.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah. And what do you feel about this sentence, a time to heal? Because you've chosen that out of all the other, a time to what, a time to this and that. You've chosen a time to heal. Why is that?
Yes, I did. Yeah, yeah. Well, because I think that Ecclesiastes, Kohelet's message is really a message for our time.
Mm,
Um, there's another story of a man who dies and goes to heaven and has a conversation with God. The first thing that God asks them is, "Let me see your shoes." And the person says, "My shoes?"
uh,
And God says to him, "I want to see if you've danced at enough weddings." In other words, the pleasures and blessings coming your way, you really have to embrace.
yeah.
Otherwise, you miss out on everything.
Mm,
So you have to embrace the blessings you have, so to speak, to put it in religious language.
I like that. I like that. Yes. And for me, a time to heal, it reminds me that you and I are both Pisces, and that
Yeah.
archetype is very much about healing.
Is
Ultimately,
that true?
it is about healing because it means you have had past incarnations where it's been tough, and you are here to heal. And usually, also, you heal others, but also yourself. Yeah,
Oh,
and
yeah.
because it's a very egoless archetype. So it's like there's no other way than to surrender to it.
That's pretty much it. Yes, I think you're right about that. Yeah, and try to make the best of it as you can.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's a lot.
That's a
That'll keep
lot.
you busy for a lifetime.
Yes, it will for sure.
A lifetime.
A few. Yeah. Thank you so much, Paul Marcus, for
Yes,
being inspiring us. Amazing. I'm
it
so
was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you for having me.